Hey, good morning. Today we're going to do a canning video and show you how to put up some green beans in the pressure canner. First step to doing that, of course, is pick some green beans. This is that 10-foot tall green bean pole that I grew beans on this year, and 10 feet just wasn't quite tall enough. But we're going to go ahead and use this and get some green beans picked. Stand by. So as you can see, we've got a nice little batch of beans here. So give or take, I've been getting right around this amount every day for the last few days. Sunday was the best. I got a good half gallon of beans. So the next step we're going to do is go inside, give these a good rinse, and if some of them are a little bit too big, like this one. What happened with this one, I missed it the last couple of days, so I'm still going to can it. This one is another example if it just got a little too big. So there's going to be a string on this one that I'll want to remove. Alright, so the next step, we're going to go ahead and rinse these off. Okay, after rinsing, I'm going to clip off, this is the end that grew on the plant. I'm going to clip that off and just kind of break it. We want a little section. The canning directions say 1 inch, but this is going to be good for us. Just going to go through and get all these done. Canning food doesn't have to be scary. I use a website called National Center for Home Food Preservation. It gives you exact directions on how to pressure can, how to pickle. It even has instructions on how to ferment foods, and we're a big fan of fermentation in this family as well. So remember, I'm going to put the link down in the video for the National Center for Home Food Preservation. It recommends that I can these green beans with pressure using sterilized jars at 15 pounds per square inch for 20 minutes. So now that we've got all the beans harvested, it's time to really get everything together for the canning project. So here's what we have so far. I've got roughly about 5 pounds of fresh beans. I've got my jar puller and my bubble remover. I've got my kosher salt. I'm going to add a half a teaspoon per jar. This is kosher salt that comes from Avery Island in Louisiana, where they make Tabasco. I've got my 10 rings, my 10 new lids. I always use new lids, not used lids. There are people who reuse them, but I don't. It's a food safety issue to me. New lids. And then I've got the jars. I've got 10 jars. All of these items that you see right here, I've washed in hot soapy water, rinsed and dried, and now it's time to sterilize them. Over here we've got our pressure canner, and to that I've added 2 tablespoons of white vinegar so that the jars won't be discolored and they get kind of a white film on them if you don't use the vinegar. And of course I've got that hooked up to the gas. I like to can outside in the summertime with my Camp Chef because it just leaves the heat out here where it belongs and not in the house where I want it to stay nice and cool. This canner holds 10 of the half-pint jars and 3 quarts of water. I've already added the 3 quarts of water and the vinegar. And now I put all the jars in here. There's a little bit of water in the bottom of each jar. I've put all the rings in here. I've put all the lids in here. And next step is to put the lid on so that that can come up to a boil, and the hot water and the steam will sterilize these jars. The arrows are lined up right now. Time to Alright, we're going to go ahead and let that come up to a boil. I'll know that it's boiling because steam is going to come out of that top vent pipe. Let's talk a little bit about the Camp Chef stove and its relationship with this pressure canner. The pressure canner cannot handle as many BTUs as the Camp Chef stove puts out. So I've got the heat set right here between medium and high, and you can see that the flame is nice and high, but if I crank it up, listen to this thing. It sounds like a jet engine. So we're not going to give it full BTUs. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid, and I'm going to remove the jars and the lids, and the rings, but I'm going to leave the lids in there. Be careful of the steam. So there's my jars, nice and sterilized. I'm going to go ahead and remove them and move them over to the table. Okay, now that I've got the sterilized jars, the sterilized rings, the lids are still in the hot water, the pressure canner remains on. So here I go, I'm going to start filling the jars. Oh, so I saw that we had some cayenne peppers over there that might look ready. So Corey picked some of these for me. I'm going to take 3 of these jars and drop just a cayenne, maybe just 2 as an experiment. Drop a cayenne pepper in there, see what happens. Okay, now that I've got all of the jars packed, I actually got all 5 pounds of beans stuffed into these jars, and they're packed pretty tightly. Now for a half a teaspoon of salt per jar. Now that the salt is in, I'm going to add boiling water. And I'm going to fill it up to leave 1 inch of headspace. And I need to boil some more water. Stand by. So while I'm waiting on that water to boil, we're going to get the air bubbles out. So if you look at this jar closely, you can see that there's some air bubbles in here, and they're kind of rising to the top. So I'm just going to go kind of around the edges and work out those air bubbles. Pack the vegetables down to make sure they're under that water level. And another thing you can do is to tap the jars like that. But we want to get as much air out as we possibly can. Oh, I thought I saw a crack in that jar after all this work, but it wasn't a crack. Just a little piece of adhesive from something. Okay. Ooh, that's a little much. Okay, so the next step, it's got a little too much water in it. The next step is to get a paper towel, wipe off the lids. We're doing this because if during this process we got a little bit of salt water on the rim, then that salt water could potentially cause the sealing not to occur. If the jar doesn't seal, it doesn't mean it's got to be thrown out. It just means it has to be refrigerated until we eat it. It will not be shelf stable. So we have about 7 days to just eat it out of the fridge. Then we're going to put the lids on. So in the shot here, we've got some stuff that Corey just picked out of the garden. Just a bunch of chilies. We've got some banana peppers. We've got some Hungarian hots. We've got some Moscow, some cucumbers, and a squash that he picked while I was working away over here. Anyway, I'm gonna transfer these jars over to the canner. Have the jars all moved over to the canner. The water is still simmering. You can see the reason we needed 3 quarts of water is so that the water doesn't quite come up to the jars. They don't have to be submerged in the pressure canner. But we don't really want the jars touching each other, and we don't want the jars touching the bottom of the canner. They are touching the side, and the instructions for the canner said that you can put 10 of the half-pint jars in here, which I have, and they are slightly touching each other, the ones here in the middle especially, but I'm gonna go with it. Next up, we're gonna put the lid on. Where's my arrow? Here's the arrow. Here's the other arrow. Gonna line that up. I'm gonna snap it on. Now I'm gonna turn up the heat. The pot's up to a boil now. You see this little top thing that has raised, and I can feel steam pouring out of the vent pipe here. I need to let that go for 10 minutes. What that does is make sure everything achieves a nice equilibrium in there, gets nice and happy before I bring it up to pressure. So I'm going to lower the heat just enough to keep that vent pipe going good. Probably can turn it all the way down to low, and we'll check back in on it in 10 minutes. Next thing to talk about is the weight. This is a weighted canner, and the other type of pressure canner is called the dial gauge pressure canner. Since this is the weighted type, it comes with 3 different options. So with no weights, it's 5 pounds. With 1 weight, it's, I don't remember, 10 pounds, something like that. With the one we always need here at high altitude is with both weights on, and now this is going to give inside the pressure 15 pounds of pressure. And the reason we need to pressure can the green beans is because it's a low acidic food, and low acidic foods need to be canned with pressure. It's been 10 minutes that we've had steam venting out of the hole, and now time to put the weights on. The weight is on, and now the weight is on, and now I'm going to turn up the heat so that we can get that pressure up to 15 pounds per square inch. And when it gets up to that, this weight is going to start rocking back and forth, and it's going to start doing that familiar hissing sound you may know from old-fashioned pressure cookers. The water is boiling quite a bit more violently. I can hear it inside of the pressure cooker there. Not too bad. I hear the jars rattling and hitting each other, but I think it'll be okay, even though a couple of them are slightly touching. And next step is to wait for this to come up to pressure. We are now at pressure. See how the weight is rocking back and forth? Hear the hissing? Now it's time for me to adjust the heat. Okay, so it's rocking back and forth, nice and gently, and we have to wait 10 minutes. That's what the National Center for Home Food Preservation website said for canning green beans. So I'm going to set this for 10 minutes. If I can figure out how to work this newfangled gadget. Alright, timer, minutes, 20, and start. See how this is just kind of rocking back and forth gently? That is what we are looking for, is a nice gentle rock back and forth. Time up. Now it's time to turn off the flame and let everything just depressurize. I guess I should stop that because it's annoying. So we're going to let everything depressurize just kind of on its own. Just so you know, it is possible to take a pressure cooker and depressurize it rapidly by holding it under cold running water. But if you do that while you're pressure canning, think about it. You've got glass inside of there. What happens to glass when it's subject to a rapid temperature change? It'll break. So we're just going to let this kind of mellow out, chill out, and you can already hear that the rocker is starting to slow down. And then we're going to open it when it depressurizes. This little thing that says top is going to pop down on its own. And then we can open the lid and take the jars out. Okay, so the locking mechanism has dropped down. This is still pretty hot. I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid. Did you hear that pop? We want to hear that pop because that means the beans are actually sealing. I see one can over here that looks like the lid is bent. I'm not sure what's up with that. But let's go ahead and get these out. This is the one I'm concerned about. The lid has this bend in it, and I don't think that it's sealed. I don't know what happened with that. It could be the ring is damaged. Once this cools down a little bit more, I'm gonna put it in the fridge. And I'm not gonna trust this to be shelf stable at room temperature. There you have it. All the jars are going to just kind of sit and chill out here on the back porch until they're cool enough to handle, at which point I'm going to go ahead and remove the rings and store them if they sealed properly. So those are still really, really hot, and we're going to let them cool. And this project is done. I have a special pantry underneath of our stairs where all of the home canned goods go. And throughout the winter, when it's snowing outside and it's really cold out, we have vegetables from the garden that are shelf stable. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Over and out, and peace out.